Okay. So what is going on, guys? Welcome to the Rebellion's Edge podcast. Our topic today will be on the survival horror genre, as it is around Halloween. I feel this is a very appropriate topic and one that I have much enthusiasm in talking about, as I have played many survival horror games, and I would consider myself a horror enthusiast. So, with us today, as always, we have our second. Well, obviously, you have me, Captain Chaos, with co-host, and we have Biodevil Dom, second co-host. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, you might as well just call me Biodevil Headache because I got a huge headache today. I'm gonna try to chime in as much as I possibly can. But yeah, and this is a topic that I'm gonna like too. But yeah, you know,
Same
it'll be
here.
an interesting discussion.
Indeed. And we have the main host, Renegade Operative.
Hey, how's it going, folks? Hope you're having a good night.
Awesome. And we have Brandon. He always has the best intros. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Bye-bye.
As always, amazing. And we have a few new faces. We have Drillbits. If you want to introduce yourself, man.
Hey everyone. So I thought I'd join this one because this is actually a topic I can contribute a lot to, and it's kind of a big part of my gaming life.
Might as well. And we also have the was it the Schmojo or the Joe Schmo?
That's the Schmojo. You got it. You got it right the first time. Hi, I'm the Schmojo, and I have lots of experience in survival. So if it's 30% of this,
He's Bear Grylls 2.0.
exactly.
To drink his own piss.
We're not going that far.
Pineapple piss. That's
He did do that.
Not me, Bear Grylls.
Man versus Wild, dude would always talk about how like you could hold on to your testicles to keep warm and use your piss to keep warm.
What have I done?
Romantic thing.
All right, and last but not least, we have unlimited specimens.
Just call me Unlimited. It'll save
Okay.
everyone a lot of trouble, I think.
Yeah.
I've played a lot of survival horror games. I love complaining about how bad they are nowadays, so I'm sure it'll be a great addition to this. It's also 3 a.m., so I'm sorry for the lack of enthusiasm in my voice.
I feel you there.
Your accent makes up for it.
Yeah. So I guess we should go ahead and get into it here. I have the document right in front of me, so I guess I will be the one to go first. First question, on the topic of survival horror, what was the first horror game you've experienced? Tell us a little about that. Anybody can go first.
Oh, okay. I can go first.
I'll go next.
So I guess the first true survival horror game that I played was actually the Resident Evil Director's Cut. I wouldn't say Resident Evil 4 just because that's more of an action horror game. So Resident Evil Director's Cut on PS3 was like my first experience with that. And a lot of people know that is infamous for a very bad soundtrack, but I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people make it out to be, but that's beside the point. From what I had experienced, when I first played it, I didn't really care for the controls, but I kind of learned just how to adjust to it just because I played games like the original Devil May Cry and Onimusha, which both used fixed camera angles, and Onimusha also used tank control, so it was more of just adjusting to a different play style. So while initially I didn't really like the way that it played, over time I got used to it, and now I just kind of feel like, when people say that it's a play style that just shouldn't be used, I'm just kind of like, that's kind of fucking ridiculous, because I feel as though if you just take the time to learn like I did, you can get used to it, but And overall, I think as a game, while it's dated as all hell in comparison to the remake, still think it's a good survival horror game overall for what it did at the time.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. I guess I'll go next. Mine.
I want to go next.
Oh yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Fine, I'll go after you then.
Okay. I guess I honestly like the one I remember that like from when I was a kid, because I don't really think I played that many horror games when I was a kid. I mostly grew up with like PS1, so I don't really think I played any that I particularly like remember as like a child or anything. But I believe I was maybe like 12 years old when I played this game. But this is probably going to be an obscure game to most people. It was actually the demo for Extermination. That's the one I most remember, like when I was younger playing, because I'm not sure if I played anything before that. I don't think I did. I might have known about them, but I do remember playing Extermination. And that game, if for most people probably aren't going to know what the hell I'm talking about, Extermination is pretty much like a mix between Resident Evil and The Thing. A lot of people like to call it a like ripoff of Resident Evil, but I would kind of disagree there because it does do some things differently, and it has some different mechanics. So I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but it does have that Resident Evil feel to it. So I did play some of that, and that did kind of freak me out. But then I was kind of easily scared when I was a kid, so it was pretty easy to freak me out. I remember mostly just playing the game because it's like, oh, there's a lot of cursing and stuff. My parents were kind of strict about like not letting me play mature rated games, and it was one of those. And I was like, yes, I can, like there's the gore and cursing and this is amazing. It's the best thing ever, pretty much.
Personal question, really quick.
Yeah.
Did you ever like complete the full game or not?
No, actually. I remember going back to it. I think it was actually a year or two ago, and getting maybe like a little more than halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
But I mostly just played the demo as a kid, and I think I got to, I want to say it was the first boss. It was like right after you met the woman in the yellow suit. But it was, yeah, I got pretty far in it, but that was
protagonist's girlfriend or something.
Yeah,
like that. I remember that much. But,
yeah, that. But that was, I want to say that was my first real exposure to like survival horror stuff. After that, I want to say I got into it. So,
yeah. So does anybody want to go next?
It's Brandon's
Yeah.
turn.
Well, my first game was actually like around 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah, I'm still technically fresh into the series, a genre or whatever. But it was Resident Evil 3. And I remember not getting very far in the game. I remember going to the police station and maybe fighting Nemesis, but I just like, I don't know how to do what I'm doing. I just dropped the game altogether and played Dino Crisis 2. So yeah, that's how I got in.
Resident Evil with dinosaurs.
Yes.
Yep.
And machetes.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I got one. If
Okay.
nobody else wants to go. Captain Chaos, I haven't really I wasn't really into. I would never really got into horror games as a kid, and so like when I got older, I started getting exposed to them a little bit more. And I think the first one that really kind of spooked me was do you guys remember that crappy Slender Man game that came out with the collecting the pages?
Oh yeah, the 8 pages. That's what it is.
And I was sitting at home alone in the dark. It was night, and I'm playing this game, and it is the creepiest shit if you are at home alone in the dark. And so my first reaction is, oh shit, fuck this game. And then my next reaction is, I need to get my fiance to play this. And so the next day I had her play it, and she got one page and started making creepy noises. She throws the headset down, just like, nope, backs out. It was it was good times.
I can go next if you'd like.
Yeah,
sure.
All right, so my first ever horror game experience, which it was a poor decision as I was quite young at the time, was Silent Hill 1. I saw that trailer with the cutscenes. I was like, this is the future of video games, man. And then I played it, and it spooked the hell out of me. I think I played it for an hour, and then I had to hide the box because I was so scared of the game. It probably messed me up as a absolute child. But then as I got older and less stupid, I got Silent Hill 2, played that a bunch, which I really enjoyed a lot more than 1. I don't know where the box is for 1 now. I'll probably never find it.
It's cursed and must-sided.
Yeah.
What about you, Drill Bit?
Good
I
Oh,
think
little
Drillbit
went Schmo didn't go, I don't think.
Well, as a kid, I really didn't play that many horror games because I was so scared. I remember my cousin would bring over Resident Evil 2, and I'd never make it past the first screen. But when I did get older, I did manage to beat it. And there was also another game I rented from Blockbuster, which was called Clock Tower 3. It's kind of different from
That game is spooky.
yeah, it's like different from like unlike Resident Evil, you actually don't have to fight enemies. You have to run away from them most of the time, and you can't actually kill them until you get to the boss level.
You said Clock Tower 3?
Yeah.
The one that Capcom did,
You
yeah.
poor soul.
He didn't
That
play
game is scary.
he didn't play
That's the only
first 3.
clock tower game I've played, actually.
Yeah,
There's
that
there's
one and
3.
That one in Haunting Ground I played. Well,
We
Haunting
need to make
Ground's
a whole
technically
podcast about how ridiculous Clock Tower 3 is.
like it
Yeah.
stopped. Like I think they had the right. Like it started on. Like I think they had the right idea on paper. It just kind of became a mess halfway through.
Yeah. Ronald Weasley.
Yeah, it was for anybody that doesn't know, Clock Tower 3 is actually like the 4th installment of the series. There's Clock Tower on SNES, then there's Clock Tower on PS1, Clock Tower 2 on PS1, which has nothing to do with Scissor Man. It's just like some Japanese like.
Well, actually,
Ghost
that's
thing.
Clock Tower Ghost Head in Japan.
Is it? They call it
Yeah.
Clock Tower 2 in the West.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, it's
Because
another.
It's because we never got the PS1 Clock Tower game, so they had to make up for it.
Right, and
Yeah.
then Clock Tower 3, which was Capcom, and then we ended off with Haunting Ground, which is sort of a Clock Tower game.
It actually started off in development as Clock Tower 4, but they added it. I think they added in some elements from like one of the canceled Resident Evil 4 betas into it, which became its own
Yes, they
thing.
did.
I actually have a physical copy of that game.
You're lucky.
Haunting Ground?
I paid a pretty penny for it, though, so.
Yeah, I
Capcom
will
really
rob
needs
you.
to make an HD remaster of it or put it on PS2 to
wish.
PS4, but we're diverging a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Did
I
anybody
don't think
else
Schmo
go,
has
or-
gone yet.
He already did.
go.
He did.
Oh, he did?
Oh, okay, yeah. I thought.
Oh, I wasn't sure.
You guys weren't
I'll
paying
take-
attention.
I'll take the next one.
I didn't go last, so. I
Oh,
guess
that's
Oh, right,
okay.
right,
Yeah,
yeah, right.
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah,
So.
Renegade is always forgettable. Sorry.
So shut up, Brandon. Eat it. So, anyway, I guess I could say my first survival horror game I seen was Resident Evil 1. But I was honestly too chicken shit to play that game as a kid because it scared me. So eventually, as I got older and I grew more attuned to playing video games, I got my hands on a used copy of Resident Evil Code Veronica X. I played this game for a while. Unfortunately, the asshole who had the disc scratched it to the point where I couldn't play the scenario with Chris, so the game stopped then, so I rebooted over. But I really liked it. I enjoyed it, and then I started getting into stuff like Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, and Dead Space. Really good games. I definitely recommend those. I think they were great for their time. And eventually I started playing more horror games from there. Obviously, there's been a decline. But for the most part, the golden age is where the horror games really shine through the ages.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So
so.
number
I can
2.
take on the next question.
All right.
Resident Evil coined the term of survival horror, which required players to survive with limited ammo, saves, and resources. How do you feel when proposed horror games break the namesake by giving the player way too many weapons? I actually have some opinions on this one.
Go ahead.
So at that point, you're looking into games like REs 4 through 6, The Evil Within, for example, maybe the Dead Space series, and and just kind of look at how how resourceful your mechanics and abilities and weapons are concerned. And I think that the problem with kind of calling those types of games, survival horror, is a little bit inaccurate, because while they are horror themed, like they're definitely horror themed. I won't disagree with that, but to say survival, I would highly disagree, because you're more focused on the combat and action. The thing about survival horror, that term, and I was kind of talking about this earlier, was that survival horror is a term that gets thrown around a lot these days, and a lot of people don't really use that term accurately, because what a lot of these quote unquote survival horror games fail to do is resource management, very limited saves, very punishing, for not actually managing your resources, and not being very cautious when using a save, or saving up your inventory for the amount of save items that you have. Health management and whatnot, things like that is just kind of forgotten. It hasn't been really been touched upon, I guess you can say, since like the PS1, maybe a little bit in the PS2 era as well, but definitely that PS1 era, where you had games that had more of a focus on like being very resourceful with your items. So when you get into these newer games that we got, like last generation and then also this generation, a lot of what you'll see is either very action heavy games with horror as kind of like a secondary thought, and survival just kind of like not even an afterthought. It's kind of forgotten. But then also just run and hide simulators. But at the end of the day, I think what developers, if they're trying to make a survival horror game, what they really need to look into is kind of go back into PS1 era and just kind of see like, hey, this is what survival horror games did back in the day. What can you do to kind of not necessarily do everything that those games did back in the day, but just kind of take what works from those games and apply them to the modern era. Because we saw games like Doom, that use an old school style, but also puts a little bit of a modern twist to it, and people love that. So I think that if you applied something like that to a more modern survival horror game, then you could make a pretty decent game out of that.
Yeah, I would mostly have to actually agree with that. And Dom's pretty much said everything I was going to say. Survival horror is kind of loosely used nowadays. We see more horror themed stuff than we do just actual survival horror. Like Dom said, to me, survival horror is smart, just being able to intelligently manage your resources and inventory space. Keep in mind how many times you save, when you save. Like in Resident Evil, you had the ink ribbons, and you have to know like when, okay, this is when I should use the ink ribbons, when I shouldn't use the ink ribbons. I think the remake of Resident Evil 0 or the Resident Evil 0 and the remake of Resident Evil like did a really good job with that, and obviously the original games too. But I feel like that if we did have an actual survival horror game in the modern era, it would be like that. I just don't feel like it's a really hard thing to do. Yet companies will talk about how they're going to go back to roots. They're going to have this game's going to be survival horror.
Resident Evil.
Yeah. but to them, survival horror now has become, like Dama said, it's a run and hide simulator. We've seen that with games like Outlast. I really liked it when Amnesia did it. I thought Amnesia was a great game, but the problem is that every game nowadays is trying to be like that because of the success that Amnesia's had. And we've forgotten about games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, or at least what they used to be. Now it's just, action fest. It's just not. It's just a shadow of its former self, and that's just kind of sad.
Let's admit,
One of the-
let's admit this. All developers, they are doing this trend because they want to make money. I remember when Capcom said this before, where we want to cater to the Call of Duty fans. It's like, okay, you're catering to shooter fans, but not your core fan base. And when you say you go back to roots, it's pretty much a misnomer because you're not really going back to roots. You're increasing the gun count, you're increasing the ammo count, you're making the game a lot more casualized and action heavy. So it's all about money. I think the problem is they need to take out stuff like random ammo drops because that is becoming a problem as well. Where you're well equipped 24/7. All you got to do is kill an enemy and that's it.
Right. The Evil Within is as much as I love that game, and I know we're gonna have to let other people go in a little bit, but as much as I like that game, the thing that it has a problem with is that you kill an enemy, they might drop ammo or drop something that you can pick up and use, and it's like, no, once you kill that enemy, it should be dead, and that would be your mistake for killing that enemy instead of choosing to run away. The thing about the other thing that survival horror does, or what it used to do as opposed to what a lot of people think it should be doing, is it used to make you pick and choose your fights. There were times where there were times in say Resident Evil or Silent Hill, for example, where you could choose to kill those enemies, but you could also choose to run, and that's something that has just kind of been forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick though, honestly though, the more I think about it, this is kind of issue I have with the whole genre. Now, I'm not excusing every single thing people have done as far as those quote unquote running high simulators though, but my issue is that people are honestly being a little narrow-minded as far as how quote unquote survival horror should be or can be. Now, granted, nothing wrong with item management or all that good stuff, right? That's cool. But saying that should be only survival horror is kind of narrow-minded. I think it should be at least other ways to do survival horror. Now, sure, it may be done right or done wrong. That's the point, though.
Could I ask
Wait,
you
hold
a
on, Doc.
question? I just want to ask you. Okay.
Now with Atlas, you guys call those running high simulators, which is true. But though, given the situation, you can't fight everything because you would get your ass wrecked. So the best chance for you to survive the situation is to not engage in combat.
Could I ask you a question really quick, Brandon? Now, as far as calling certain horror games, do you think it would be fair that we came up with specific subgenres within horror games, so that way it would be, I guess, so that way not every game is considered survival horror, because that is a term that these days it is kind of thrown around a lot, and you do see a lot of more, and I hate to keep bringing up the Evil Within, but Evil Within isn't really a survival horror game, it's more of an action horror game. So do you think that would be more a better way of doing it, where not everything is called survival horror, it just whatever type of horror you can make out of that particular genre, whatever subgenre you can make up for it?
Yeah, the point we're pretty much trying to make here is survival horror has pretty much kind of lost its meaning. I get what Brandon's trying to say is that people are saying that survival horror needs to be more encompass more than just what we remember as being survival horror, but there's a reason why it is called survival horror, because the run and hide stuff doesn't really it doesn't really fall under that definition, because you're not really, you are surviving, but it's a different
that's the thing
kind of.
Yeah, that's the thing though. You're technically still surviving on the definition of survival. Survival horror resources, this and that though. But the problem is that imagine making a game like Atlas back in PS1 days. Can you imagine that being possible?
Actually, there were
Is it?
we were talking about Clock Tower earlier. There were games that had that idea.
I mean,
where
like in the same extent though.
Yeah, like
okay.
Clock Tower's whole premise was that it was about running away from enemies and not confronting them.
yeah.
Mm.
Also, I'd like to point out that this is from another end of the spectrum. I do agree that I think that survival horror overall as a genre title is pretty much dead, to be honest, because there's so much that it encompasses. Like, we haven't even talked about like games like The Forest or like 7 Days to Die, where
Mhm.
it is a survival game. Because I mean, that's what I think of when I think of survival. I think of like, crafting, gathering, stuff like that, and then the whole horror aspect, like shit coming at you in the nighttime. I mean, that's just like The Forest. I think is probably my go-to example in what I deem to be a survival horror game.
Yeah, like what I would say would probably be kind of well, it would just mainly be a main survival game. Is probably The Last of Us. I mean, it has horror elements in it, but its main focus is survival.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Like The
Basically,
Last of Us
survival
is more,
action.
yeah, it's more survival action, but horror is kind of its it uses horror as a backdrop, but it's not the core focus. And then I think that's what like myself and Chaos are trying to get at too, is like with
It's more like the
survival
Walking
horror,
Dead style of horror.
like the thing with like survival horror is that survival is supposed to be the core of of those particular games, whereas horror is kind of like its backdrop. But with like something like Outlast, horror is more of its core, whereas survival is kind of like not so much its sort of thing. It's not a survival game per se.
I
You know
mean,
what
what's your definition of survival?
Definitely, if we were to kind of categorize survival specifically, and there's a fly in my face, sorry, but yeah, sorry, that kind of got me distracted. But if we're kind of looking at survival in particular, like definitely resource management, and not in the sense where it's like, hey, you grab a battery, I'm gonna go look for another battery so I don't run out of batteries for my camera. No, I mean like managing your health, managing how much ammunition you have, managing the of inventory space you have, key items you carry on with you. That's why like limited resources or limited slots with you was kind of I would say while it does gimp the player as far as like what they can carry, it does make you think about like, hey, because I am limited, because I'm in a situation where I can't just carry everything with me, I need to take steps and precautions so that way I can ensure that I survive from point A to B.
Just a quick interjection, and
Mhm.
I mean, isn't not to like negate anything, but I feel like the point in majority of games is surviving. I feel like it might be better to rebrand these games as something other than survival, and maybe I don't know, something different, because I feel like surviving in those types of I feel like survival is us versus the environment.
Well,
Yeah.
well, there's
Well, yeah,
Like-
it's
like,
a very
I can-
Go
well,
ahead.
yeah, it's like a very broad statement. I mean, in Resident Evil 2, you're just trying to survive and find a way out of the police department, since you're in an entire city that's infected with zombies.
And that's definitely true, but when it comes to like the core of the mechanics and whatnot, it's built around that whole notion of surviving. Whereas something like, hey, is it like you said, Shmo, like with any game, you kind of have to survive in pretty much any game you play, but some of those games are not built around specifically surviving, because you might just get like tons of ammo or something like that, if depending on the genre we're speaking of. So I think, yeah, like I would definitely agree, like either rebranding or, like I had mentioned earlier, like making new subgenres specifically for like those like first person horror games like Outlast, stuff like that. I think would work, because that whole term, going back to the whole term of survival horror, it gets thrown out a lot. but not many people really know how to use that term specifically.
I feel like it's going to get into the same point that RPG is getting to, where it's just everything's an RPG.
Yeah, oh yeah, just because it has RPG elements doesn't mean it's
Or
necessarily an
world.
RPG.
Yeah, or how turn-based RPGs are starting to become less and less common these days.
Yeah,
Because
a lot of games, not even
from-
RPGs, have these level up systems too. So
Well, I will say 2 points I want to make here. Number one, I wouldn't say every game is about survival because, I mean, there are literally games that your goal is to get from point A to point B, and that's about it. We've seen games like the Prince of Persia remake where you literally cannot die in that game, no matter what you do. So there are some games out there where it's either dumbed down to the point of where there's no challenge, where survival is not even an option, it's just getting from point A to point B. Another thing I would like to interject with is the fact that this is not uncommon. There were like games back then, even from Shinji Mikami, where he said survival, there's survival horror, there's survival panic for Dino Crisis, where it's a survival horror game, but there's a lot more focus on, crafting elements and making things, and also trying to survive in different situations from the dinosaurs, where you have to mash buttons and do all the stuff that wasn't in Resident Evil. So I do think that the subgenres should exist. But I don't think that every game is necessarily the same in terms of surviving in general.
Oh, I was just saying, majority of games it's based off survival.
Oh, I know. If you die, then of course if that's in there, then you have to not die. So that is survival. But there is some games that don't do that at all. They hold your hand throughout the entire experience.
Mm-hmm. And I get what you guys are saying. I didn't think about the whole power fantasy games where it's your objective is just to destroy all these monsters, and that definitely doesn't have the survival aspect to it that I'm kind of getting from what you guys are trying to get at.
Just look at RE6. That game is literally, you have regular human beings surviving impossible situations where they should.
Call that dramatic horror from last time I checked.
That's
what they called it.
Dramatic horror, and they explained this. They said that the dramatic side was Chris having post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't really about survival horror, but you made it sound like you were bringing back survival horror by going back to roots.
Especially with Leon.
Yeah.
Especially with Leon.
I mean, Leon's is probably the closest to being kind of survival horror, but it's still very heavily action focused.
I mean, that was thrown
until
out
you get to
after
chapter 3.
Yeah, when you get to chapter 3, that's it. You have machine guns, magnums,
Assault
everything.
rifles with bayonet.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially when you get to Simmons' ridiculous transformations.
Oh my god.
Transformers.
Well,
Simmons in disguise.
Well, we spent a long time on this. I think we should go to number 3.
Yeah.
all right,
Who wants to read off number 3?
What's number 3? I can.
Okay.
Number 3, horror games have obviously changed. Has obviously changed now in a new form and more first-person oriented perspective. Do you think first-person games can be scary, or are these games over-exaggerated in the medium?
I think we kind
Actually, I won't go first
sort
on
of
this.
covered this to an extent, but
Actually, I just wanted to say one point on this real quick.
all right.
Like any other horror game, yes, they can be scary, but after the first time, you already know what's going to happen. So
Yeah,
the element of surprise is gone.
Can
As
I
far as over exaggerated, I do agree with this
can I interject?
because
real quick?
yeah.
fine.
So yeah, I definitely agree with Brandon. Any game can be considered scary, it like I said earlier, it varies depending on the person. Not everybody gets scared at the same thing. But would I personally consider this a very fresh perspective or a very welcoming perspective? No, I think it's very oversaturated because I don't think that first person horror or over the shoulder action style survival horror games, if they went with that style, shouldn't exist at all. No, I think those things should exist. But I think what we need to get like I want to see a return to like very old school classic style survival horror, but only for the reason because of the fact that you look at the Resident Evil remake and you look at Resident Evil 0, the HD remasters for those, and you look at how well those sold, right? And it's like you question, like, that there's a market for it, yet it's not really being catered towards. Like, if there's a market for it, you'd think that there'd be some catering to it to some extent, even if it's not on the scale of some of these other ones, like first person horror games. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense why it's not even being touched or being experimented with again. My guess would be just because of the fact that they want to try to get in that casual market that is never going to be willing to learn how to play with, like, fixed camera angles and whatnot. But that's beside the point. I would say that first person horror, yes, it is something that oversaturates. It's oversaturating the market just because this is all we've been seeing as of the last like 3 or 4 years as far as horror games are concerned. We've been seeing first person horror game after horror game after horror game like this in this style. The cancellation of PT especially didn't help, because if you know anything about that game, it wasn't even going to be primarily first person. It was going to incorporate various different styles of Silent Hill into that particular game. So you were going to get like various different perspectives and whatnot. But first person was just one perspective because they wanted to kind of, go back to that Silent Hill 4 style of gameplay and whatnot, from what I remember. So that was a thing. And like Brandon said in the chat, it's mostly indie developers that are causing this oversaturation, although it's kind of seeped into the AAA market. And that's what kind of worries me.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I thought that Amnesia was a great game. The thing about that game, however, is that if you replay it, it's not as scary because the first time the scares are all scripted mostly, except for a few instances, and the second time you play through it, it doesn't really have that same effect. So, but unfortunately, with the popularity of games like Amnesia, we have this oversaturated market where every game has to be this first person run and hide simulator, and it's just it's to the point now where it's gotten pretty ridiculous and everybody's doing it. So that's why people want people like me and Dom, we want so much to see a return of games that are more like not like this and rely more on just the old, or more like the old school survival horror stuff, or just something different from that, or different from the run and hide stuff that we've been seeing lately.
And just to clarify really quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but like, it's not that we're saying that those types of games shouldn't exist. It's just that we want to see variety in the market. That's why, like, when I see like RE7, for example, I don't like that direction, mostly because it's very telling that Capcom's not doing it because that's what people want. It's because of what's selling in the market right now and what's what people are buying. And unfortunately, that's something that's overset. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Something else that Chaos was talking about was like replayability on these first-person horror games. I played one called The Layers of Fear on Steam.
Oh, that one.
And it was in early access. And I feel like an early access horror game, I just don't think it has a real place in the market, because like once you play through it and you have to wait for more content to come out, I don't know, it's just a weird, I don't think that's how horror games should be sold.
Yeah. Well, early access is like a subject in and of itself. Like in general, like I just kind of think the early access system is a little bit like it is beneficial to the developer because they get feedback early, but it is also bad for the consumer. Yeah,
it's a big gamble.
Yeah, it's really just something that I'm not sure if should even be a thing. I mean, it is good that in some aspects that it is, but at the same time, I don't know. It's like there seems to be a little bit more negatives than positives because so many people can abuse that system. But yeah, I don't want to get too much into that. I'm deviating a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Anyone else want to go?
Pretty hard. I wanted to say something about trend following. That's essentially what this is trend following. And this is another thing that's not uncommon. We've seen this before when RE4 was sort of, big back in the day. A lot of people wanted to be the next big third-person shooter with the over-the-shoulder camera. Because of this, a lot of games came out in that vein. Some good, some bad. I think this is a thing that always happens, unfortunately, where people try to see something and emulate it to try to get some success, and they don't turn out that popular because of it. And I think the first person is starting to be one of those things where people see Amnesia and Outlast. They are the games that did it, and they got really big off of it. And now games like Resident Evil that coined the term survival horror is trying to emulate that same thing in Resident Evil 7 when they really didn't need to in the first place. I think that going first person for them, now that I think of it, it's a little bit unnecessary because they could have just made like another third person horror game and they would have been fine, no problem. What the fans complained about in Resident Evil 6, 5, and 4 was the fact that it was a lot of action and there wasn't enough scares and there wasn't enough slow pace, brooding terror in those games.
To kind of go off of that point really quick, a lot of people like the Revelation series only because while it wasn't a perfect series, it was closer to what people felt as though Resident Evil should have became.
Oh, those games are slow paced, and the way they just set up the scenes and everything, you can tell they put a lot more effort into making those games survival horror than the other mainline Resident Evil series where you're just shooting everything, guns galore, all this stuff.
Yeah. Like, I do really think that the only thing missing from the Revelation series is a bigger budget. Because when you look at Revelations 2, there's a lot of really rough spots in it.
Yeah. So, did anybody else have any opinions on number? I think we're on number 3.
I have a small one, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
Something I've noticed is this sort of trend, I would say, started after, in the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, there's a massive vacuum of horror games. For some reason, developers there just weren't no horror games for a couple of years. I don't know what happened there. This was the generation right after RE4 and all that. But I think what's happened is people saw Amnesia, and as people have previously touched on, it's an extremely popular game. And to them, that is the way of making horror games now. And they've sort of, the survival horror genre is sort of like, we don't need to make those games anymore because they were sort of a product of their time. I think a lot of people consider me, with the tank controls and limited saves, which when a game mechanic, so to speak, they were more like we don't have enough memory card storage space mechanic, which in the end did really well for them. But I think that's the problem is I think we need just a survival horror game to come out that's a lot more modern. Maybe I think that might be the problem is people see them as a bit of an old style of game. I mean, Revelations 1 and 2, I really enjoyed, and I thought they were, great games that were pretty underappreciated when you look at it in the mainstream context. That's really all I had, though.
Okay. So does somebody want to take number 4?
I'll do it.
All right.
All right. What are your thoughts on the indie horror scene when it comes to the development of survival horror games, not on a big budget? So these games are a lot more varied when it comes to the particular amount of games they have on the indie scene. Like we see stuff like Daymare, and we see other things that are big indie titles. Like I think wasn't Outlast an indie game before it got popularity?
I don't actually.
The studio is indie technically.
It was a new studio, but it was from the people who had worked on I think they would worked on games like Prince of Persia. I think they were Ubisoft people or something. They came over to make it.
It's like CD Projekt Red. Technically, they are indie though, but they have a budget of a AAA.
Yeah.
Or they have a AAA team, but they're working on it.
They had the budget and they had the experienced people working on it.
I think that's what makes indies shine the most is when you take a big collective of people from other teams. Like originally, and I know this is not an indie game, but for PT, for example, that was going to be Silent Hills. It was a lot of people from Team Silent poured it over to Kojima Productions. So when those
Really?
yeah, when those talented people come on board for like indies or AAA games, then of course that starts getting me a little bit more excited because for the people who worked on these older Golden Age survival horror games, they pretty much know their stuff when it comes to how these games work. So they have new people on board as well that they can school and, you know, they can give them advice on how things work. So I think that the indie scene has a lot more variety than the mainstream because as we touched on before, the mainstream has a lot of first person stuff, whereas the indie scene has, you know, they still have third person, they still have first person. It's a nice mix in my opinion.
Yeah, and another reason why PT like had so much, like you were talking about Team Silent working on it. I don't know if you knew about this, but they actually had like Junji Ito was working on it. If you guys don't know who he is like a manga horror author. He's really popular in Japan.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But
Isn't
yeah,
he the guy
he
that
actually worked on
inspired-
the imagery and stuff for the monsters, and that's why they were so like just kind of generally just strange and out there, and that's why I liked it so much because like you were talking about like how you bring these teams of experienced people together, and I think that was a really good addition to have for Silent Hill. But it's just a shame we cannot see the finished version of that game because I would love to see what he would have brought to the table for a game like that.
Yeah, like Junpei Ito's a really good horror artist. I mean, he would have been perfect for a Silent Hill game.
Yeah.
I want to say kind of going off of that and then just kind of continuing the topic. Like definitely just the fact that they had people from the original Team Silent, and then Kojima himself saying that he wasn't really he said he tends to get scared a lot, and that's why he felt as though doing a survival horror game would be very, very interesting to do because if he can get scared of it, he felt as though he'd be confident enough to scare others with it. And then working with like Del Toro and Norman Reedus, it was just kind of a perfect, match there. So I think that, like maybe one day they'll all kind of come together and do a survival horror game. They're not working. I know Norman and Kojima are working on Death Stranding, but Del Toro and Kojima are not working together right now for Death Stranding or any survival horror related games, but they want to in the future. Anyways, that's beside the point. When we're talking about like the indie horror scene, the majority of it is, hey, let's try to copy off of like games like Amnesia, Outlast. Let's try to now, ever since PT had been canceled, let's make PT spiritual successors. They're going to be completely in first person.
Yeah,
and it's just a joke. I'll be right back.
All right. Yeah, I guess I'll just go ahead and give my opinion on this. Like, there's a lot of, like Dom said, there's a lot of those types of games in the indie market, but there's also, I feel like at the same time, there's also a lot of creativity in the indie market in terms of gameplay and story. It's just that, the indie market doesn't usually have the kind of budget that AAA titles have to build a game, or so we often end up getting like RPG Maker stuff or something made in Unity, something like that. So graphically, while it might not be good, it could, the gameplay wise or story wise, it might be interesting. But unfortunately, those kinds of games are few and far between in the indie market. We often get the run and hide stuff more
I'm
often
sorry.
than not.
I'm sorry.
I was
what was
basically
the
just
question.
I was basically just saying that like there is some creativity in the indie market. There are some unique and interesting concepts. It's just that a lot of the times it is overshadowed by the what you were talking about earlier, the run and hide game.
That's mostly
games.
mainstream.
Yeah. And I just kind of wanted to finish up my point before I got interrupted. But all I was gonna say was that you look at the indie scene right now. Most of it is first person stuff. Although we already had one attempt at classic survival horror, which is back to 1998, which didn't turn out so well. But then we have two other games which we already did developer interviews for, which is IOU and we had
Nightcry, fucking jeez.
we'll get to Nightcry in a
Yeah.
moment, but IOU and then Road Fever. We did developer interviews for those, and I'm a lot more confident in those. Not because of any like personal bias, but based on what I had seen so far. It just kind of seems like, these are Resident Evil fans, and they know kind of what made Resident Evil good, and they're going to try to do everything they possibly can to make a similar experience, if not a new experience that could possibly be even better. And then we had things like Nightcry, which the only thing that's good about that is that Dante gets killed. But the points still stand. It's like it varies in budget because it depends on who's team and whatnot. We had Daymare 1998, which is a new one. I don't know why 1998 is a popular thing to add in the titles now, but I guess it is. Daymare 1998 is kind of interesting because they actually have a former Capcom employee on the team now. And this is actually like a small studio. I don't know if this is if they've done anything prior to this, but they were working on a fan Resident Evil 2 remake. Now, personally, I wasn't a big fan of that fan remake just because of some of the design choices they made, especially after they had switched over from Unreal 3 to Unreal 4. But them doing a whole new IP, even if it doesn't turn out to be a survival horror game, I think that there's a lot more potential in their game now that it's a new IP instead of just something that is owned by Capcom.
Yep.
So I'm done with my little tangent.
Anybody else have any opinions on this?
Nope, I don't think so.
Going twice.
No, I'm good.
All right.
So
we
all right.
can move on to
So number 5. Somebody want to take number 5?
I can.
All right.
Over time, we've seen survival horror at its biggest boom on the PS1 and PS2 era. Unfortunately, a lot of horror IPs have not been utilized for this generation. What horror games do you feel require a reboot or a sequel done right?
Fucking
Can I go
Dino
first real quick?
Crisis.
Oh,
That's all I gotta say.
Can I go
Yeah,
first real quick?
that series really needs a big reboot after the third one.
The
Yeah.
third one was trash. Let's pretend that didn't exist.
Yes.
But I need to go first real quick. You guys remember that game that was a demo for Shaolin Monks that was inside the game?
No.
It was like I don't remember what it's called though, but it was like I guess horror game-ish where you walk around like a movie theater. That was a demo level.
The Suffering?
I think that's what it's called.
Oh
but
yeah.
wasn't the suffering like in a prison?
Yeah, it was in it.
yeah.
Well,
The first one.
the
was.
first one, the sequel was in various locations.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
the
remember
ties that bind, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember the game title. I just know that particular game was bundled with inside Shaolin Monks as a demo, where you can play it anytime you want to, as far as I'm concerned.
It had to be the Suffering. Let me fact check this. But what do you say, Drill Bit?
It probably was the suffering that ties that bind, since I think that was released the same year as Shaolin Monks.
Yeah. The Suffering was oh man, it's awesome. I love the atmosphere. Like every monster is basically equivalent to how a prisoner died or whatever. So maybe if a prisoner got hanged, then the monster would reflect that. And they had a morality choice system in that game where you could do good or you could do bad. It'll reflect on the ending that you get in the end. And I like the fact that that game had it where the first ending carried over to the second one, so to start out differently and it ends differently too. So I wouldn't mind seeing the Suffering again. Actually, that's a pretty unique concept. I really think that needs to be rebooted.
I don't mean to interject
I mean,
here,
the
but
second one.
did the
sorry.
second game open with like it was like you killed your family or something like
No,
that?
well, remember I said the saves from the first one carry over
Yeah.
to the second one.
Yeah, because I played the second game and I hadn't played the first one, so
If you killed your family in the bad ending, then that ending still sticks in the second one.
Yeah, because I remember that from the second game, but I hadn't played the first one. So I guess if like maybe if you don't play the first one, they just stick with like the bad ending or something. I'm not sure, but I just found that interesting.
Also,
but yeah, go ahead.
what were you saying, Drillbit?
I think I forgot.
Oh, it's fine, man. It's fine. If it comes around to you, just let us know. But
I
Yeah,
can go
can
now
I,
if you'd like.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh. Well,
Yeah,
you go.
Alright, I'm
Yeah.
back.
For me, the game that needs to be rebooted is Eternal Darkness.
Well, to be
Oh.
fair, Eternal Darkness only had one game. I still think there's actually room for a sequel.
They were doing a sequel.
It's-
They were,
wasn't
yeah,
it
it was
bad?
called like
It was more like a spiritual successor.
yeah, well, spiritual success. It was what was it called?
Shadows of the Eternal.
Shadows of the Eternals or something.
Wasn't it
It
bad?
was no, it was canceled because I think one of the people working on the project, it was found out he was like, I don't know, it was like a pedophile or a sexual
I
predator.
think he was arrested for having like CP on his computer.
Wait,
Nah,
wait,
the Batman.
game developer? Was it an older guy?
Yeah, I
don't
believe
remember.
so.
Because I remember seeing an older guy like a while ago. I think it was last year or the year before. Got arrested for. I think he was involved in Minecraft. He got
I don't
arrested
know.
for CP. But that's best I
It is a shame though, because I really did want to see a
Real
sequel or a spiritual
Yeah.
successor. To
Like
that.
I'm honestly surprised they didn't do one with the Wii U, since it has a lot of potential with the gamepad.
I thought they were doing that for the Wii U actually.
Like
But,
next to Fatal Frame, like the Eternal Darkness would have worked perfectly for the system.
yeah.
Mhm.
Also, another honorable mention would be a Call of Cthulhu.
Oh, dude, I was gonna mention that one too.
It's a really good one.
I love that game.
I love the investigation that you do, and it's completely pointless because Cthulhu happens, and you're like, oh.
I will say though that the
Really
tone of
good.
that game like completely changes near the end because it's like it just becomes like a first-person shooter. Because in the beginning it was more like survival horror, and then it's like they put more emphasis on the shooting near the end, and it's
There's
like
a
you're
bit
just
of,
shooting everything.
There's a bit of Silent Hill downpour there, if anyone's played that.
I
Where
have
you're
it. I never
shooting
beat
everything
it.
with a shotgun.
Yeah.
It's a real buggy one, so it's hard to complete. So
The frame
Oh,
rate is
so
bad.
your
It's
fault?
really bad.
That game sucks.
It's funny because I believe Call of Cthulhu was another game that did have a sequel in the works, but it never came to see the light of day. I think because I remember seeing
Yeah.
a trailer for it, but it just died. I guess I don't know. But yeah, I guess I'll just go ahead and give my answer. I would like to see maybe like a reboot of Call of Cthulhu, or just generally like I would like to see more Lovecraft inspired stuff because we don't really see enough of that. Like if we do see games like that, it's usually like it's either just forgettable, it's not done right, or it's just it's I don't know. We just don't see enough of Lovecraft inspired horror games. It's more like zombies and the conventional stuff, vampires, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I would very much like to see more games with having to do with the Lovecraft mythos.
If you don't mind me finishing off this topic, so there are there's a lot of stuff we can pick and choose from. A lot of interesting decisions or choices, I guess, people have made as far as like what should come back. I actually kind of argued that since we kind of talked about this game, Extinction should come back because it was published by Sony, so you'd think that they would try to make some effort to bring it back. I think that would have some kind of relevance
Or
to it.
Siren.
Yeah, or Siren.
You'd have Siren Blood Curse.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it didn't do too well when it first came out, and they never even got a physical release in the West.
Right. So I
Although
mean,
you can import that
definitely,
game and play it on PS Switch. Yeah, sorry.
definitely, something like some of those stuff could come back. Trying to think what else could they pull from. Alone in the Dark could I know they try to do another one, but it
Yeah,
was
like in
co-op or
2008.
something.
Like
No,
the funny
no.
thing,
There was another new one recently that had like
Illumination.
Illumination.
Was it? Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
no,
but-
that's not how you do it.
Like the thing is that Alone in the Dark actually had some really cool ideas I liked, like the item
Yeah.
management.
Hmm.
Like in order to manage your items, you'd have to keep them in your code, and you have to do it in real time. So you have to be careful to know when there's not enemies around to be able to mix bullets or heal yourself. And
Yeah.
they
That
did,
dialogue though.
yeah,
But-
it's
Hmm. But like Alone in the Dark, I think they could have tried to bring it back and remake it and do it right this time. Don't try to turn it into something that it's not.
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna look at a good example of how to do Alone in the Dark right, Alone in the Dark 4 or what it's actually called,
the New Nightmare.
New
yeah, the
Nightmare.
New Nightmare.
I played
Uh,
that.
Yeah, that is something more ideal, at least as far as like the atmosphere and style
Yeah.
of the game. Like that would work out a lot better. Trying to think, there's a lot of shit. Capcom's Sweet Home. If that got just completely revamped and brought back, I think that would be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Like,
There's a lot to pick from.
Like I would
like-
actually want to see like another game based on The Thing. I know they did one for the
Yeah, they did.
PS2
Yeah.
back in 2002. I would have loved to see a sequel to it, or maybe a new game.
I think it'd
Yeah.
be more likely that they do like just a completely new thing game if they ever went back to it. Yeah, they did do a thing game on the. There was a thing video game, but it was a sequel to. It was supposed to be a sequel to the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like one really cool mechanic they had in it was the whole trust system in which people would begin to distrust each other if they thought one of them was the Thing, and you had to figure out which one is the Thing.
Could make a good multiplayer game actually. Where one person's the Thing, and then everyone else has to try and figure out who the Thing is.
That
thought it
really
was pretty
sounds
good.
familiar too. I feel like they've done that too with I can't remember what game it was, but I've heard that's a similar concept where like
Secret Hitler and Battlestar Galactica.
yeah, like somebody on your team would be the monster, and you have to figure out who it is, something like that.
Yeah.
I actually have just one more addition to this. That friggin' Dreamcast game back in the day that you were on a spaceship. I think it's called Carrier.
Carrier.
Yeah.
Carrier is on an aircraft carrier. Not
Yeah. Oh yeah. Speaking of
Well-
like the Dreamcast, there was actually another pretty underrated horror game on it called Ill Bleed. That one was really cool.
Hold on.
There's also D2.
Yeah. Like
There's-
D2 is just a very surreal game.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's more surreal than horror, to be honest.
we need to get D3.
What were you saying, Dom?
Yeah, I think there was another one that I was looking, but Carrier was one of them.
I just like-
Dreamcast.
Blue
Yeah.
Stinger.
I like the mechanic of how everyone was like infected on the spaceship. I know Dead Space sort of brought the whole spaceship infected people into mainstream and made it popular, but I think that another game in that vein could work because we haven't seen a new Dead Space in quite a while.
Yeah, like the series has kind of been on hibernation now.
Yeah.
I'd like to see another Parasite Eve.
I never
Yeah.
After the third
I mean,
birthday,
Yeah,
people are like,
Yeah, but I think the reason why Square Enix hasn't made one is because it's with licensing issues with the original author.
Yeah, that's always like the worst. Whenever you hear like, oh, it's because someone else licensed and doesn't want to do it, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, that's like, what can you do?
Oh, really quick before we move on to the next one, somebody mentioned Dino Crisis. I actually
did.
Yeah. What I think what Capcom really should be doing with that franchise is either bring it back in the same way that you did Resident Evil Remake, or what you could do, and I honestly think that Dino Crisis would work out a lot better as a kind of action horror game, is make it play like RE4. Like it
Dinosaurs,
honestly
yeah, okay.
would play really well that way.
Yeah,
it really would.
Yeah, for that kind of setting, I do think more action horror would be a lot more fitting, considering that the enemies are a lot more, they're a lot more threatening than zombies.
Yeah,
But you play as Two Rock.
yeah, like
You get the
and
recurve ball.
I've completed Dino Crisis one time, the first one. I still need to get back to Dino Crisis 2, but I don't think Dino Crisis 2 is a bad game, but it feels very arcadey.
They changed the tone like completely. I mean, it's not a bad game, but they changed the tone to be more of an action game than a horror game.
Yeah.
Like,
In that case, it's fine.
I
like
think
that,
the problem is that a lot of people kept complaining that it was too similar to Resident Evil, so they wanted to kind of separate it from that.
which they've done that before. Capcom is known for doing that, where they kind of go about certain games, they kind of make it like Resident Evil, then it becomes it's a completely new IP, but there's still similarities to it, and once it becomes successful, they're like, we need to make this more action. So like that's why you have things like Onimusha, Devil May Cry, Dino Crisis, but then they got to the point where that ended up impacting Resident Evil to where Resident Evil now has a identity crisis, in my opinion. But I personally would like more of for like Dino Crisis in particular, and I know this is kind of diverging and going a little bit off topic, but Dino Crisis, I think, if a new one were to come, if it played like RE4, but maybe had like a mix where like some sections, maybe they're more horror oriented, more horror sort of style, and then most of the game being a lot more like action based, then I think it would be fine. Or maybe even if it played kind of like Resident Evil 3.5, if anyone's seen that build of RE4.
Yeah.
Something like that I think could also work, because I don't necessarily think that you can't do a survival horror game that has dinosaurs, although I think that it's a lot more fun going around like fucking Rambo and just blowing shit up.
Yeah.
So I definitely get that.
Like there has to be like a good balance between it, or else it would end up becoming too goofy to take seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do think that dinosaurs can be scary if it's done right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
So, are there any final topics on this one?
No, I think that was pretty good to end off, so we can move on to number 6.
I can read off number 6.
Okay.
How important do you think that monster design and story is of the essence of what you witness in horror games? I think it's personally, I think very important.
Yeah, it's very
Silent Hill.
Silent Hill's the prime example of that, since it actually plays into the part of the character's psyche, like with Pyramid Head and James.
I was gonna say Silent Hill does a very good job that it kind of delves into each monster kind of has what I think a lot of people would agree has its own like purpose and symbolic meaning. They're like Pyramid Head, for example, is all James's like torment and whatnot, and is a pure representation of that. And I there are so many like different monsters we can pull from for different characters, and like Harry has various different monsters he goes up against, but as mentioned before, all of them kind of go into what makes that character very have a very dark personality, or a side that you don't really know about them until you really get into personality and whatnot.
Yeah, I think what made Silent Hill so special, so much different from Resident Evil, is that it really did delve into their more personal demons.
Mm-hmm.
If I could jump in here, I think the most stark contrast you can look at is actually perfectly summed up in Silent Hill. In Silent Hill 1 and 2, you have these amazing designs that are absolutely unforgettable. And then you look at Silent Hill Homecoming and Downpour, where you have some of the worst designs I've ever seen in a horror game.
Oh, yeah.
Completely takes away any like tension, because they just look goofy.
Yeah, they're uninspired.
Yeah, like I think. Like I was gonna say, like I think the worst offender has to be having Pyramid Head and Silent Hill Homecoming, since it makes absolutely no sense for him to be there.
He's not anyone's monster but James. That's why it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's completely egregious. Just cameo for the sake of it.
Yeah.
That is the same game that does have man who is slightly looks a bit devilish, and that's it. That's his own thing. He just looks kind of like a devil, and that's a random enemy that you fight. It's just so pointless. I think there's one good design in that game, and it's like a big elephant-looking thing that looks kind of neat, and then the rest is just absolute garbage.
Elephant-looking thing.
Like it really shows how much passion that Team Silent had into the games and what their vision was, and what Konami kind of lost with the later games.
I think another good one to look at might be The Last of Us. I mean, the clicker in The Last of Us was something that I still think about on occasion as like a monster that really affected me when I was playing. It was creepy.
Yeah. I do really like that all of the different forms of the infected are all just how long they've been affected and how much it's degraded their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have to say that in my opinion, I do believe you guys are correct. The monster design means a lot to the player for what they see. There is a big fear of the unknown. So I think personally that them making the monster designs different from the typical zombies, that's always good to see because it makes it more varied than what you expect. Like when you see zombies, usually they're all like torn up and everything. But when you see something different, like you saw in The Last of Us with the clickers, it's something you really didn't expect to see. So I like the fact that they keep these monsters very humane, but at the same time they're so grotesque that you just can't help but be afraid of them.
Do you mind if I interject really quick?
Go ahead.
One thing that I actually think that Resident Evil does well with, like you look at like other zombie games and like, maybe the boss is just a little bit beefier, or maybe it's a really like fat zombie and that's it. But it's like you look at something like, the Plant 42 from Resident Evil 1 or Nemesis from Resident Evil 3 and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's very telling as to, like as far as the... can we not reference DMC, please? That game is just ass. but like...
It'll kill you.
But yeah, it is... you look at like the Tyrants and stuff like that, and it's just like, hey, there's a company out there making these grotesque looking monsters for like profit. We need to stop this like right now, and it's like that's the whole story of Resident Evil. And it's like, so it does kind of, it is very telling.
Evil Within had good monsters too. Like
the Evil Within, it's kind of like Silent Hill too. It's like some of the monsters kind of go based off of a certain like themes. Like there's one called Trauma, and this is actually my favorite enemy design in the game because it's a monster that is missing a limb, and whatever stub they have left is attached to like a long piece of wood that's stapled onto their back, and they basically rip this thing off of their back and drag this wooden plank that has like claws on it onto the ground, ready to hook your body. And I thought that was a very good design because it kind of captures what trauma is basically, very painful and awful feels, but yeah.
Something else about horror games for me is when I'm playing the game and they don't show the monster right away and it's kind of in the dark and it's spooky. I feel like once you see it, it becomes a lot less scary. Like once you see the scary thing chasing you. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. There's a rule of horror. It's like, if you don't see the monster, it's a lot scarier. It goes back to Lovecraft's fear of the unknown people fear what they don't know or don't understand. And when you explain the monster, and when you show the monster, and when you explain how it can be killed and how it can be hurt, it takes away a lot of that fear from what the monster is and the mystery of the monster. Because then it kind of it doesn't humanize it, but it makes it more like you can understand it now. You know how it works, and it defeats the purpose.
Yeah, I believe that's what made Silent Hill so special, is because you never really knew that much about the monsters, and all you had to base off was just their designs.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the monsters in Silent Hill or Silent Hill 2, and most Silent Hill games are just a symbol or representation of the character's mental traumas. Like in Silent Hill 2, the monsters represented something from James's, something in relation to James, like, Pyramid Head and the nurses.
Nice. All right, so I think we can move on to the next one.
What was that question we were on, by the way? Because I
6.
stepped away from.
6.
Oh, okay.
All right, so number 7. Is there any obscure horror games that should return in your eyes with a bigger budget? Mainstream budget, to be exact. So,
Mighty Number 9.
Oh, shut up.
Get out.
I don't know. I guess were the Fatal Frame games really super big in terms of budget?
In Japan.
Kind of was.
I believe they're pretty extremely popular in Japan. I'm not sure about their budgets though. I assume they've always had pretty AAA budget though. They've never seemed lacking in any way.
Yeah.
Obscure. Man, I really have to think about that. I guess just a lot of the games that had good concepts, like maybe stuff like Extermination coming back to mainstream. Stuff like, there's another game that I'm thinking of that's actually called Obscure, but I never played
I was
it.
gonna say that too.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
Didn't it have
Obscure.
2 games?
You mean like the horror
did.
game that's in the high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was in. I think it was it college?
It was
or
the
high
first game. The
Yeah.
first game was in the high school.
I like the idea behind that you could also do co-op in that game because you could control the other people, but it's basically like, if somebody dies in that game, they're permanently dead. You have to be like, that game is fucking survival horror. There really aren't any, like, you could go back to a save, I think, but you really have to be careful because if somebody dies, then they're permanently dead. So yeah, then they're out of your party and your party starts dwindling. So it's pretty much almost like a combination. It's like almost like one of those teen slasher movies, how they just keep getting picked off one by one.
Yeah.
It's kind of
And-
like Sweet Home, because Sweet Home
Yeah.
had that mechanic.
I really would like to see another, I'd love to see another Obscure game, like if they brought that back. I don't think they will, but that would be awesome if they did,
Yeah.
because I did like the first game. I can't speak for the second. I heard it was dog shit, but the first game was great. So
Yeah, like the first
should come
game
back.
was kind of rough in a few places, but it had a lot of promise. I do think it should come back, maybe with a reboot with a bigger budget.
Also, Don, what were you saying?
No, I was just saying that Sweet Home, it kind of had that, if you go around and you kind of had to keep, your characters together for the most part. You had 5 team members to kind of worry about, and if one of them died, it was very detrimental, to say the least, because at the very end of the game, all 5 characters, if you have all 5 characters, it makes the final boss fight very easy. Whereas if you only have one, you can already tell, well, how fucking hard that would be. And the true ending is that all survive, kind of like Resident Evil, where the canon ending is all the characters survive. So, something like that coming back, like Sweet Home, I don't think it had a small budget. But if it came back, I think it would be very interesting to see something like that. What else can we bring back? Like Extermination, I can agree with.
definitely that.
Yeah,
Spawning Grounds.
like would you say The Suffering had a big budget, or
Yeah, they were with Midway, so I would consider them definitely a AAA team.
I guess Carrier. You know,
Hey, I got one. Cold Fear.
Cold
Fear.
Cold Fear. Yeah, that could possibly. If Ubisoft still holds the rights to it, then yeah, they could probably bring it back.
Yeah. I know there was another obscure horror game on the Wii. I think it was called Cursed Mountain.
Yeah, I heard of that.
Like,
I haven't played it though.
Yeah, I haven't played it personally, but I've heard it's actually pretty good.
There's actually one more I think I have in mind. It was this game on the PS1 called Galarians, where you can control this like psychologically disturbed boy, and he had like about these telekinetic powers. I think something like that could warp around a video game where like you're trying to escape all these madmen chasing you, but you have these sort of powers that you need to maintain by drugs, and the drugs is like sort of your means of survival. So I would like to see something like that in a video game again, because I remember you could set people on fire, like you can have a mental trip and blow their heads off, but it'll kill you in the process if you don't take a certain amount of drugs.
Sounds like maintaining your drug overdose, the video game.
I
That's
mean,
what it sounds like.
it does, but it was something that I played, and I thought it was pretty decent. It wasn't as good as RE in my opinion, because they had a lot more issues with finding items because they blended into the background. But I do think that game had some potential in terms of being something that could be done.
Can we have Adam Jensen be the main character and just be like, I never asked for this?
Oh sure, no problem. Alexa to flex and do the voice.
I completely asked for this.
Can I say Indigo Prophecy? Would that count, or is that too mainstream? and
I
not completely horror.
Who did Indigo Prophecy?
That was
don't-
David Cage.
David Cage. It's a David
Yeah,
I
Cage.
just
Quantum-
did
Quantum
any
Dream.
other director, and then it
Beyond
probably
Two
was pretty good.
Souls.
Yeah.
I just want that first scene, but like an entire game.
Oh yeah, the whole murder mystery behind it, where
Yeah.
like you don't know if you did it or not. Yeah.
The game doesn't turn into Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, it does turn real in Dragon Ball Z.
I have an idea actually. I'm not sure if any of you know about how, what is it, Onimusha started off as before it became Onimusha. It was supposed to be a spin-off Resident Evil title taking place in feudal Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah, I've
actually
heard of that.
think, I think it would be very interesting to have like a feudal Japan style survival horror where, and you know, where melee weapons would be like your key to survival or whatever. But you know, depending on what you have, like maybe you have just the little like knife or whatever, but then you can find like an actual sword and whatnot, and that would you know, vary based on damage and whatnot. So I think that would be very interesting to see, you know, if they try to turn that into more of a survival horror type of game.
Only if you play as Tom Cruise, though.
The last right?
Oh god, I remember that movie. Oh my god.
Is that movie bad? I don't remember.
Wait,
No,
what
it's-
movie?
The Last Samurai is a good movie,
All that.
but it had the worst advertising campaign I've ever seen.
It's also inaccurate to the actual story from
Yeah.
what I understand.
The last Tom Cruise.
All right,
We're
so-
diverging a little bit, so I think we should somebody
on.
take the next question. Unlimited, do you have the document?
Yeah, sure. We're on 8.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to happen for the future of the survival horror games, and what inspirations could they take from the golden age of horror games to improve on all the problems they have now?
Pretty good.
I'll start and say just make PT, but finish it this time.
Uh,
I mean, we could look also into the VR stuff that's coming out. I'd like to see a lot of horror games put in that type of situation as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, PT is a real tall order because Konami is shit right now.
Mm-hmm. You mean
yeah.
Pachinko Machine, Nami?
Oh, no. Konami, the zombie corporation, because that's so
Konami?
original. Konami.
Nazi. Anyways, jokes aside, I'm actually I'm gonna have a different answer. I actually want to go off of what I said earlier. I really want to see, a return to very classic style survival horror. But, like I said before, it's only because I want to see that sort of variety within the horror genre. Because right now we're just seeing that oversaturation of, first person survival horror games. So, and, if sales numbers are to go by anything, then they're clearly based on the sales numbers that we got for the Resident Evil remake and the Resident Evil 0 HD remasters. Clearly, there's a market for that sort of survival horror game. So I think that that's what I would like to see come out of that genre.
Yeah, I would agree with that for the most part. I think I kind of have mostly the same opinion as Dom has. It's I'm not opposed to the first person horror stuff. It's just that it's after a certain point they all become pretty much the same. I would like just, if anything, more variety. Because I feel like that's what's missing is variety from the horror genre. Because when you get so much of the same stuff, it just becomes oversaturated, and we really need some just more diversity in terms of what we have to choose from.
They need
and
to
we're just
have
not really getting enough.
They need to have old and new IPs doing different things that is not the same, that is not first person. I believe this is critical for them to emulate the golden age and have so many things from that era come back, but in a different way.
Yeah, if you don't mind me interjecting really too, here's the thing. Sometimes it's okay to go back to old gameplay styles, to old concepts.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned before, Doom is kind of living proof of that. The new Doom that came out, I think it was earlier this year, right?
Yeah.
If that's anything to go by, sometimes just going back to those old concepts and old gameplay styles is better than going with what's modern and current.
Yeah, and there's good modern over-the-shoulder games as well, like Revelations 2, like Brandon said in the chat. I wouldn't mind seeing a Revelations 3, but they have to work on that story because it wasn't the greatest. But
Revelations
2's story was basically the evil within. I mean, it literally took the same ending.
Yeah, it's really not as bad as the evil within story.
Yeah, like I think.
Oh no, the Evil Within story is so much better in comparison to Revelations 2, in my opinion.
Oh,
it's just
going to be a long
I'll have to agree to disagree there.
It's just very convoluted, but again, I can see where Dom is coming from on the fact of Resident Evil never really had this mind-swapping psychological aspect to it until Revelations 2.
Yeah,
Resident Evil was more biological, just
right.
Zombie fucking outbreak, it's
that stuff
which is exactly why I say the better story, because it wasn't trying to rip off anything, it was being its own thing, whereas Revelations 2 is like, let's make the enemies like the Evil Within enemies, let's take the story, especially the fucking ending, because the main antagonist and one of the side characters swap fucking minds.
Well, there's two endings, but
yeah, for the Evil Within, but both endings turn out that.
I was talking about Revelations 2.
Yeah, but both endings for Revelations 2 still show you that Natalia's mind was swapped regardless.
Also, I'd like to say something. I'm still pissed off about how you even get the true ending of that fucking game. It's like, they don't tell you shit. It's like, oh, you have to do this thing that you never would have known otherwise you had to do.
Yeah. Like, I'll admit, I actually missed it the first time and didn't know.
I did too.
Yeah. Okay, honestly though, yeah, and on paper or on the final product, it does seem stupid though, but if you look at it from a deeper meaning, you actually understand why they did it. Because for Moria, she doesn't like guns, and for her, only for someone to get rid of the phobia, just make them do it. So in her case, it'll make her get a gun and save Claire. Otherwise, she won't save herself in the long run and thus get herself killed.
Yeah.
So you gotta look at it. You gotta look at it from a different perspective, other than like, oh, it's stupid, I gotta do this and that. But you could look at it from a story perspective, it makes sense. So yeah.
another game that has come out that is in the horror survival genre is Dead by Daylight. I don't know if you guys have seen that on Steam. It's an interesting 1v4. One person's the killer, four of the people are trying to survive, and they're like in that third person view, while the killer's in a first person view. It's a fun little like take on the survivor game or the horror game that I found fun.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that one actually.
I'd like to see more games like Until Dawn, because Until Dawn was great.
Yeah, I actually did. That was kind of a refreshing game to me in terms of you're actually mattering, because a lot of games like to tell you how your choices are going to matter, but most of them, doesn't really seem to have any impact on the game.
David Cage.
Yeah, David
Yeah,
Cage.
like I really feel like Until Dawn's probably the first game in a while that actually felt like your choices mattered and that you could actually get real different endings compared to like Telltale or any of the Quantic Dream games.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of weird how that game's getting. What is the new Until Dawn a spin-off or?
It's a spin-off in VR. It's
okay.
Like the saddest announcement of all time is just the spin-off in VR.
Like, I really do think that Until Dawn could probably work as an anthology series, kind of like American Horror Stories, a different story with each season. Maybe they could do that with Until Dawn, just have a different story with each game.
Yeah, right. Thinking that, like maybe like a different monster or something like that, because it was Wendigo and the Wendigo Until Dawn.
I think you're good to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Ren, you want to read off the next one? Or how about Chaos?
Ren is Rip.
Oh,
Okay. I guess I'll do it because I haven't done it in a while. Number 9. Is there any horror games you're intrigued into picking up and playing that has not been released? Huh.
It should be are there. I think there's a bit of a typo.
Okay. Somebody else might have to go because I can't think of any.
Death Stranding, but
yeah, but I'm not even sure
know
if Death Stranding's gonna be a horror game.
It's
not. There's not a lot we do know about Death Stranding.
Hold on, guys, one at a time.
Sorry.
To clarify, by the way, Death Stranding is confirmed not to be a horror game. It's going to be an action game.
Yeah, so I guess that crosses that off the list. Like, to be honest, the only horror game I'm kind of slightly interested in is Resident Evil 7, I guess. But even then, I haven't exactly been the most positive about it because I kind of think it is straying too far from the series.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm not looking forward to anything. I haven't seen anything that has piqued my interest. Most of what I've seen so far is just, if it's not a game that's getting VR support, it's definitely a first-person horror game. And I'm just like, okay, cool, that's fine. But it's like, I don't want to just have this because I think I mentioned this in my own video. San Francisco playing the Resident Evil 7 Lantern demo. I played that demo and I was just about as unimpressed playing it as I was just watching the trailer for that demo when it was revealed back at Gamescom. And that's the thing. It's like, I feel as though if I play any type of first-person horror game, regardless of whether or not it has combat, the one thing that you'll always know is that if there's something that, if you can get away just by running and hiding, you already know how to play the game, you know what you can do, you've already mastered it. Because that's all you have to do. You just take advantage of running and hiding and you're set. And that, to me personally, I don't feel as though that's fun. Going back to that whole thing that we kind of went on about survival, making choices as to whether or not you should use up the ammo that you have in your inventory or decide to run past everything you possibly can so you can save that stuff for later. That's more of an interesting way of playing a game that's horror based, because it makes you think and makes you it makes you make certain decisions based on how well you've managed your. To me, that's a lot more fun than just running and hiding.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could say there were horror games I'm looking forward to, but unfortunately not. And it's a shame because it's October and I really can't think of anything that I've heard of that's horror related that's coming out anytime soon, except for Outlast 2. And I just wasn't very impressed with that game, so I'm not sure. There really isn't anything to speak of. I mean, unless there's some kind of indie games I'm just not hearing about, but I just haven't heard about anything, so I can't really say I'm looking forward to anything because I haven't heard about anything, interesting, at least, is coming out. Resident Evil 7, like Dom said, is just, I'm not really looking forward to that. It just looks like it's trying too hard to be every other game that's on the market now. So I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record because I might have to repeat myself. I really feel like we need to have more variety in just horror games in general, because I'm seeing most of the same type of game, and I'm just either not excited for it or just not interested. So I don't know. I can't really, for this question, I'm just going to have to say I can't think of anything I'm really looking forward to. So I wish I could say different, but as of right now, there's really nothing I can think of.
I guess I can go real quick. So I'm still looking forward to Resident Evil Remake 2 because I want to see how that game turns out. I don't have the highest hopes because Capcom, but I still want to see what they can do with this. I don't think it's going to be as good as the original, but I still want to try it for myself and see what happens. And another game I'm looking forward to, I guess, a little bit. It's probably not going to be scary at all, considering the fact that it's an online game. But I am looking forward to Friday the 13th because I want to kill people with Jason. I just want to have that experience of going around and chopping people up and putting them in sleeping bags.
Yeah, but it seems more like a game you'd mess around with friends, really.
What was that other game that was supposed to play kind of like it, but it was supposed to have like different killers? I think it was called Last Year or something.
Yeah, last year. That was it.
Yeah.
I know what you did last year.
I think both of those games would be pretty interesting to play because you can either be the killer or you can be one of the 4 to 5 players that are running away from the killer.
Yeah, the survivors.
I don't know how it's gonna work. I guess they put you on a timer or something. But if you can survive, you can be like, yeah, I fucking survived, and that scrub ass killer couldn't kill me.
And if you don't, you die horribly. So I guess it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
But I guess we could move on to. Is this the last one, number 10?
Yeah.
Just a second before we do, I was going to say that I personally am excited to see where horror goes with VR. I don't know if survival horror will do super well in VR, but I mean, it just depends on if we can get like some really good hand support. I don't know too much about how good the hand support is in VR. To be able to, like, aim your gun and have that survival ammo collecting.
Are you talking about like with like the PlayStation Move or just like with the controller?
I was thinking about like PlayStation Move and stuff like that with
I can't speak for the PlayStation Move, but with the controller, RE7 is kind of weird because you have like 30 to 60 degree turns, right? So it feels very awkward because it's like, yeah, sure, you can move your head around in any direction you want, but when you're trying to turn, it's like the most awkward thing turning like 30 degrees left to right. It just like
that sounds weird.
it doesn't feel right. Like if you're not playing that game without the headset, or if you're playing that game without the headset, you have the full like 180 degree turn, so you can turn from left to right at any direction. And you could stop at any point during that turn. Whereas with the VR headset, you're kind of forced to move your head around. And I'm just like, that's fine and all, but I feel as though if you're going to allow me to have the turn, just let me have the turn and let me move my head, because then I could have the advantage of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think VR in general is a technology that needs to be further improved before it reaches its full potential.
I
Like
agree
right
with that.
now, it's just in the early stages, and I
Yeah.
feel like when it becomes more developed, maybe we will see more scarier experience with horror games in VR. But as of right now, it's just something that's not fully
I feel like we'll
optimized.
see. I feel like we'll see horror, but not really horror survival.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or like, I think like the most we're ever gonna get is maybe like haunted house simulators on it. I don't think there ever will be a true survival horror game on VR, at least one that's practical.
I
Luigi's
will say
Mansion
though,
VR.
I will say though, on as far as VR is concerned, so far I'm liking it, but I want to get to experience more games because I only got to experience RE7 and nothing else, so I can't really say whether or not it's worth the $400 investment. But so far, with my short experience with it, I did enjoy it.
Okay, so I guess with that we should probably move on to your number 10.
All right, I wanted to read
Somebody
that
want
off.
to read them? All right.
All right, so in closing, what are some of the best elements of survival horror games in your eyes? I would have to say the atmosphere for the most part. The atmosphere is really the first thing that you witness. So when you see the opening of Silent Hill 2 and you see like just a dilapidated bathroom and you see James just sort of washing his face and reminiscing over his wife, that atmosphere already pulls you in the first 15 seconds of the game. So I think that's very important. Same with Resident Evil. Like the first thing you see is that big ass mansion and the zombie dogs chasing the characters around and everything. So it sort of sets the mood a little bit. I think that's really important. Same thing with like the survival elements, like not having a lot of resources, not having a lot of health, not having a lot to rely on. I think that is sort of getting lost in translation as we go from horror game to horror game. They take that stuff away from you, and we were talking about this earlier with action. They just give you more and more and more of it, so it makes that point moot.
Yeah. Speaking of Silent Hill, I think probably one of my favorite intros, or one of my favorite things about Silent Hill. My favorite Silent Hill game was 3, and I feel like speaking of the intro to Silent Hill 2, pretty much kind of telling you everything there is to know about the game before going into it. I think Silent Hill 3 did a great job of doing it as well, where you see pretty much all the important plot points of the game and what's going to happen. You already kind of get the idea of what the game is about, and I really did like that. So I thought that was really great. But yeah, obviously, in terms of some of the best elements of survival horror, it would definitely be the atmosphere. I think a good atmosphere can really pull you in and really make you feel immersed. And yeah, the atmosphere and just being constantly on edge, because you never know when you're going to encounter a monster and what you should do when you encounter the monster. So you're always there's always that feeling of tension and dread. And I feel like if any game can do that, then it's pretty much accomplished, what it set out to do in terms of being a horror game. And I think those are the really important elements. The atmosphere, the tension, and not having it maybe being not having many resources, or not knowing what's around the corner, not knowing when and where you're safe. I remember the first time I played Amnesia, I never felt safe. Like I was always on edge. And that feeling went away as I replayed it, but when I first played that game, I was on edge all the fucking time. And I was fucking terrified. At certain points in that game, I was actually really felt scared. And that's saying a lot. So
I would say personally, definitely like what you guys were saying, like the atmosphere and the environments and whatnot. I would also say sound design and just the music design kind of helps out a lot too, because something that I miss with like older survival horror games is that they had really good soundtracks. And
Silent
it's
Hill.
something that you don't really see, like it's something you really don't see these days. Sound design, and this is something that I'll actually give Resident Evil 7. The sound design is on point. it sounds very good. But if that can be a consistent for all horror games, regardless whether or not they're actually survival horror games or not, I think that'd be very nice to see. And also kind of just like the resource management and stuff like that. And actually, I didn't bring up this point earlier, but I bring it up now since we're kind of closing off. But the way that like things are balanced, like going from like Resident Evil 1 to Resident Evil 2, like Resident Evil 1, you had a lot less enemies to deal with, but they took up a lot of your ammo, and they took a while to kill. Whereas Resident Evil 2, you had a lot more enemies and they went down a lot easier, but that's how you ended up losing a lot of your ammo if you just kept focusing on killing the numerous amounts of enemies that were in those rooms. So I think enemy balancing and just item placement and things of that nature is very key as well. So that's something that I hope maybe we can see again. Anybody else want to go?
I'll go next. I think the limited saves are absolutely amazing for making you absolutely give up hope. Because there's always a moment, your first time playing a Resident Evil has ink ribbons in it, where you get to a point where you have no ink ribbons, and then you try and continue, and you get like 20 minutes forward, and then you're like, I can't save. And you realize that you've completely just wasted all that time. And then you go into like a boss fight and you just get dominated because you have no armor. I really love the absolute, like, just the cutthroatness of it. Like, the fact that it doesn't care. If you mess up, then you're done. You'd lose. Nothing you do at it. I kind of miss that in, modern games, and they're kind of a bit too lenient with you, and they're not willing to sort of, like, absolutely just crush your soul like older games would.
Yeah, there's not a lot of that punishing, difficulty anymore that really punishes you for not being smart about when you save and how much you save.
Yeah, I guess you can say that's really all about, just the lack of control. I guess you can say that you give players. That's what's key.
Although I do feel like, because I was doing a live stream of this not too long ago, but Alien Isolation does that pretty well. I mean, in the beginning, I think it does give you a lot of save points, but because in Alien Isolation, you have these save points. You can't, manually save the game. You have to go into this save point and save the game. So I think later on in the game, the save points are they become more and more spaced out. And, you encounter the xenomorph more. You have to run around more. You have to, there's a lot more tension because, if, you might lose a lot of progress if you're not smart about what you do. So I think that really adds to it. Anybody else want to go?
Well, I'll say a few things. I pretty much agree with what you all guys said. I really do think that the thing that is missing is the tension that older survival horror games brought, and having more leniency and checkpoints kind of does ruin that, and it doesn't make it as intense as it used to be.
Yeah. All right. Well, if nobody else has any opinions here, I guess we can start doing the outros. I suppose since I'm hosting this time, I will start with myself. I am Captain Chaos, co-host TCP, and I have you can find me on Twitter at Captain Chaos, and you can also find me on YouTube by the same name, although there is a space between Captain and Chaos. I do a lot of gaming content. I do a lot of Let's Plays and unboxings. I occasionally do reviews. I'm trying to do more of that. But I generally like to do a variety of stuff. So if you like that kind of thing, that definitely check me out. And I suppose next I will go with BioDevil Dom.
So yeah, you guys can find me as BioDevil_Dom on YouTube and on Twitter, and then on Twitch I am Dom241996. Later this week, I'm going to try to stream The Evil Within for TCP Horror Month. I don't know if I'm going to play that game to completion or not. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I haven't. I still need to finish Shenmue 2, and still kind of that's still being put on to delay because of some technical issues and things of that nature. But in the meantime, just look forward to that.
All right, awesome. And suppose next we'll move on to the Shmojo.
I'm the Shmojo on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, and that's TheShmojoe. If you join me on Twitch, I stream just about every night. It's about midnight Pacific. That's the word. And I give away pixel art. So if you like pixel art, come get some.
Awesome. All right, and next we have Drillbit.
Oh, well, you can find me on Twitter at Drillbit777. I do have a YouTube, but it's mainly inactive right now, so there's really not much content on it. So most of the time, you'll just find me on Twitter.
All right, awesome. Brandon, if he's not dead.
He's rip. No, wait. Wait.
He died for Harambe.
He's coming back to life. Come on, Jesus. Walk on water.
Harambe died for your sins, Brandon.
Oh, you motherfucker. All right. You want me to outro you, man? Because I know you're about to...
Yeah, he might want to. I don't know.
I know you're about to strangle some children.
I think he's having technical issues.
All right, so I guess I can outro him. You can find him.
No, you don't.
Go ahead then.
Yeah.
Brandon,
I was busy killing gorillas. Sorry. But anyway, you can find me on both Twitter and YouTube as RG514.
Repeat that because you cut out. You cut out.
I did? Well, fuck you.
You did. Repeat it.
Fine. Twitter, YouTube, RGMagic514. Lightsabers out for Harambe, Jigglypuff, stuff.
Okay. And we also next we have Unlimited.
All right. You can find me on YouTube at Unlimited. Follow me on Twitch at Unlimited Streams, but I rarely stream because I hate talking live. You can find me on Twitter at Unlimited Space because I have terrible branding and I'm hard to find. And that's about it, really. I make really bad Let's Plays, don't watch them. Unless you do. But if you do, don't tell anyone.
All right. So last but definitely not least, we have Renegade Operative.
Okay, you can find me infected with the T virus on Twitter at RenOperative_. You can find me on YouTube at Renegade Operative, where I will be uploading Let's Plays and this podcast and all that good stuff. I'm going to be working on a review for Mafia 3. That game has been quite hilarious to play, so...
Not launching 3.
Well, you can say that, yeah. Frame rate 3 being bad, and I definitely will do a review on that, so look forward to that. So this is us signing off, so Chaos, could you please carry us off the show?
All right, sure. This has been the Rebellion's Edge podcast, episode 3, the... I can't read that full time. That's the survival horror or something.
The survival horror genre.
Yeah, the survival horror genre. Hope you guys enjoyed. I feel like this was a really great thing to do for Halloween. You can expect more Halloween-related content from us pretty soon. We will be doing more streams, more TCP plays, stuff like that. So that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you all for the next Rebellion's Edge podcast. Until then, we'll see you all later.
Go play some survival horror games now. Get out of here.
I'm dying. I'm dying.
That was a great way to stop.